Anger doesn't always show up as shouting. Sometimes it hides in silence, in clenched jaws, in cold stares and heavy sighs. It simmers underneath our words. It burns quietly in the background of our day. Zen doesn't ask you to suppress anger. It doesn't shame you for feeling it. It teaches you to sit with it, fully, gently, curiously. Because the problem isn't anger. The problem is what you do when you don't know how to hold it. 5 seconds of reactivity can destroy what 5 years of love built. But 5 minutes of mindful stillness can dissolve what years of resentment hardened. You don't need to bury anger. You need to understand it before it speaks for you. Anger is energy, loud, alive, often misunderstood. We're taught to fear it, to shut it down, to smile while it burns holes in our chest. But Zen doesn't treat anger as the enemy. It treats it as a message, a signal that something inside you feels violated, ignored, unsafe. Suppressing anger only buries it deeper, where it grows heavier, sharper, more explosive. But when you meet it with presence, you soften it without silencing it. You ask, what are you trying to protect? What are you afraid of losing? And in that space of quiet listening, anger becomes less of a weapon and more of a doorway. You don't need to explode to express anger, and you don't need to suppress it to keep peace. Zen teaches the middle path, a way to acknowledge anger without letting it control your hands, your voice, your life. Anger becomes dangerous when it's either ignored or indulged, but when it's observed, it becomes insight. Next time it rises, pause. Feel it in your body. Name it without blame. You're not failing for feeling it. You're healing by facing it. And if you value these reminders, gentle, steady, grounded, subscribe and tap the bell so when the fire builds again, you'll know exactly how to meet it with calm. Anger isn't a sign that you've lost your way. It's a sign that you care, deeply, urgently. But without awareness, caring turns to damage. Words become sharp, tone becomes cold, and connection breaks. Zen invites you to pause at the first spark, not to judge it, but to breathe with it. Instead of, why am I angry? Ask, what part of me feels unheard? Anger often points to an old wound, something long buried, now pulled to the surface. Mindfulness doesn't erase the fire. It gives you space to sit beside it until you can speak without burning yourself or the people you love. Anger is not a mistake. It's a messenger. It shows you your limits. It shows you your values. It shows you where you've been silent for too long. But when you react without reflection, the message gets lost. Zen teaches you to sit with the flame, not to fear it, not to fan it, but to understand its shape. You ask, is this anger fresh? Or is it carrying something old? Is this mine? Or am I holding someone else's heat? 5 breaths. That's all it takes to interrupt the explosion and turn it into inquiry. You don't need to be ashamed of your fire. You just need to learn how to hold it, without letting it burn everything down. The world teaches you to look calm, even when you're falling apart. To smile when you're seething. To say, it's fine, when everything inside you says it's not. But Zen doesn't ask for performance. It asks for presence. Suppressing anger only delays the eruption. It doesn't dissolve the pain. It buries it. And buried emotions always find a way back. Mindfulness offers you a space between the feeling and the reaction. That space is sacred. It's where healing begins. It's where choice returns. You can be angry and still kind. You can feel the fire and still respond with clarity. The practice is not to push the anger down, but to sit with it until it softens into truth. Not every angry moment needs a response. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is nothing. Silence is not weakness. Stillness is not surrender. They are tools, ancient, powerful, steady. Zen reminds you that reacting is easy. Pausing is powerful. When anger arises, the ego wants to defend, wants to win, wants to speak louder, faster, harsher. But your strength isn't in how loud you can be. It's in how still you can remain without shrinking. In that stillness, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. And sometimes, the calmest person in the room is the one who changes everything. Anger is loud, but underneath the volume, there's something softer. Hurt, fear, disappointment, boundaries crossed too many times. Zen invites you to look underneath the fire, to listen to what it's trying to protect. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to lash out to be respected. When you respond from understanding instead of pain, you don't just protect others, you protect yourself. 5 breaths. That's the space between reacting and responding, between losing yourself and remembering who you are. Anger may knock on your door, but you choose whether to let it run your house. It's easy to confuse suppression with control, but one is silence soaked in fear, and the other is silence rooted in wisdom. Zen doesn't ask you to bottle your feelings. It asks you to feel them fully, without being enslaved by them. Suppression is pretending you're fine. Control is knowing you're not, and staying steady anyway. You don't avoid the anger. You meet it with breath. You stay when you want to run. You breathe when you want to break. That's not weakness. That's the highest kind of strength. Anger can be a teacher, if you're willing to learn instead of explode. It teaches you what matters to you, where you feel unsafe, where you've abandoned yourself. Zen teaches you to bow to the anger, not worship it, not obey it, just honor it. You feel it rise. You hold space for it. You ask it questions. And when it no longer needs to scream, you speak from clarity, not chaos. This is how healing begins. Not by avoiding emotion, but by building a relationship with it. Sometimes anger rises because something inside you is asking to be seen. Maybe it's a boundary you never voiced. Maybe it's a need you never met. Maybe it's an old wound still bleeding beneath the surface. Mindfulness doesn't fix the anger. It reveals the wound beneath it. And Zen doesn't push it away. It sits beside it, quietly, patiently, willing to listen without judgment. You learn that your fire doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you real. And real people burn, but they also shine. You don't have to fight the anger. You don't have to run from it. You can breathe with it. Sit beside it. Ask it why it's here. Zen isn't about removing the flame. It's about learning how to hold it without getting burned. That means learning to pause, to choose your words, to meet the moment with presence instead of reaction. You are not your first thought. You are not your harshest impulse. You are the space between the emotion and the action. And that space is where freedom lives. Every time you choose stillness over shouting, you reclaim power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that holds. The kind that grounds you when everything feels hot and wild. Zen reminds you, the most dangerous anger is the one you deny. The most powerful response is the one you craft in calm. Anger isn't an enemy, it's a fire. And fire, when tended carefully, can bring warmth, not destruction. You get to choose how you burn. There's a difference between feeling anger and becoming anger. When you become it, you lose your center. When you feel it, you learn from it. Mindfulness teaches you to witness the emotion without fusing with it. You are not the storm. You are the awareness of the storm. And the more you sit in that awareness, the more space you create between impulse and response. That space is where healing happens. That space is where maturity begins. You might not always handle anger perfectly. Sometimes the words will escape. Sometimes the heat will win. That's okay. Zen doesn't demand perfection. It invites practice. You return. You reflect. You breathe again. And the next time, maybe you catch it earlier. Maybe you pause before you speak. Maybe you stay instead of explode. That's growth. That's mastery. Not silence, but skill. Anger doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. Zen accepts every emotion, not as a flaw, but as a teacher. Your job is not to shut it down. Your job is to learn how to carry it without letting it carry you. You can hold fire without letting it consume you. You can speak truth without losing kindness. And that's the art of Zen. Fierce, calm, awake. Some people will push your limits, test your patience, poke your pain. Anger will rise, naturally. But you don't have to follow it. You don't owe every trigger a reaction. You don't owe every insult a reply. Buddhism reminds you, peace is not passive. It's power under control. The less you react, the more you choose. And every time you choose presence over heat, you free yourself. Anger held mindfully becomes strength. Anger released unconsciously becomes suffering. The difference is awareness, a breath, a pause, a willingness to feel without attacking, to speak without wounding, to lead without dominating. This is Zen power. Calm, focused, deep. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply holds its center, and in doing so, becomes unshakable. You will feel anger again. That's not failure. That's being alive. But next time it rises, you'll be ready. You'll know the breath is waiting. You'll remember that space is your superpower. You'll know that sitting still with heat is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. And in that stillness, you won't lose yourself. You'll meet yourself. You are not here to be emotionless. You are here to be awake, to feel fully, to love deeply, to burn without breaking. Zen doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. And anger, when understood, can become fuel for truth, for boundaries, for real change. Now tell me, what is one moment where anger taught you something deeper about yourself? Drop it in the comments. Your reflection might help someone else feel less alone with their fire.